Ted, can I make a history check to see what I know about these ruins?
Sure, go for it.
Boom, a 19.
Nice. So, you heard tale of the ancient city of Elvarth, lost to history, where elves and dwarves communally lived together.
Whoa, that's really cool, Ted.
D&D lore. Sometimes you use what's written, sometimes you just have to make it up.
Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdarchist Dave, and as usual, I'm joined by this nerd.
Nerdarchist Ted.
Hey, if you're looking for more D&D, why not research that subscribe button?
And if it's more Nerdarchy knowledge you're after, then you just might want to ring that notification bell.
Speaking of Nerdarchy knowledge, if you want to also add some Nerdarchy knowledge, maybe some more lore to your game, you can check out of the box encounters from Nerdarchy. Also, you can help support us that way, and you get a cool product out of it. You can go over to the website, check it out. There'll be a link in the description. So real quick, before we jump into this video, I do want to say, when we're talking about lore, we're not going to be talking about specific D&D lore. Instead, we're just talking lore in general in the game, whether it's the stuff that you come up with at your table or the official stuff from the Wizards of the Coast. There is a ton of great YouTube channels out there that cover very specific D&D lore, and I would highly recommend you go find them and search them out. Just, there's plenty of them, and they do a really fantastic job. Mr. Rex and also Forgotten Realms Explained from Jordan, the PH is silent, are all great sources, and there's even more than that. With that, let's jump into it and talk about this stuff.
And that's absolutely true. And with thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of DMs at this point in time, so many campaigns that have been run, there is so much stuff that's out there. And sometimes you've got homebrew, sometimes you've got modules or adventure paths that have been run. So the question is how important is lore in D&D?
So there's two different ways of looking at this, right? We can look at it from the stance of lore in the games that we use as dungeon masters and players, or we can look at it as lore from the game Dungeons & Dragons, the official lore that kind of the game has been built up around, that's been going on for a very long time. And to that, I'm going to say it is very important to have the lore in your game. I'm not going to say it's necessarily important to have the official lore. That's a taste thing. That's like, what do you like? What does your players like? What do you like doing at your table?
And that's very true. I know I've had the pleasure of gaming with numerous GMs, and every game, every story, every GM has their own style, and sometimes even those styles change. So as you explore the world and you get to find things out, sometimes to make that world unique, you want to break away from the traditional D&D lore, and D&D itself has actually done some of that, because it's changed throughout the years.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ted. Throughout the editions of Dungeons and Dragons, the lore has changed. Some of the old lore is not relevant anymore. Some of it has kind of evolved. Some things they've just decided to move around and change. I mean, for instance, in the early days, the crazy wizard did it was often the explanation. And I feel like WotC went back and they reimagined some of those humble beginnings for creatures and monsters, and they've done a really good job. Matter of fact, a lot of the lore that's been crafted and created for 5e is a lot better than some of the earlier stuff. I mean, the writing and design has just evolved over time, and not to say all of that was bad or wasn't good for when it came out, but those that are writing now, they have that foundation to build off of, so it does make it a little bit easier. And like anything, the craft gets more sophisticated as time goes on.
And I can't agree with that more. All of these things, and don't get me wrong, I have zero problem with the crazy wizard did it, but I also love hearing about, throughout these edition changes when they've taken something that used to be the crazy wizard did it to this is how the creature evolved, or this is where it came from. And now we have something that is so vastly different than what it was before, yet mechanically it's the same. that is just great. But there's beyond lore. The giants themselves have greatly changed. And it's one of the things that is very puzzling to me, who has been playing this game for so many years, where giants that used to be so much larger than they are now, 80 to 100 feet tall, and could just easily step on humanoids. I'm like, how big was the planet where these creatures all live? It's a scenario where it's like, all right, I don't know how this works. And now, like, you're talking about, they max out at 18 to like 21 feet or something along those lines. They're not these colossal figures that just destroy everything in their path. They're powerful, they're big, but I'm like, if you've got beings that are all together and they're 80 feet tall, where do they live? So that's something that mechanically, lore wise, has greatly changed. So like, you could take that and throughout the edition say like, oh well, did something happen to the race, and make a change to your world to say, why did they shrink? Why are they so closer to the normal races now? Maybe they're shrinking. Maybe maybe there's something that's going on in your world, and you want to get into that, and that could be a fantastic game to play at as well.
They're not shrinking. Everything else is growing. I blame it on the price of plastic, personally. Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Also, like, so we can look at lore of micro versus macro lore in the game. So what I mean by that, like Eberron, Forgotten Realms, we have a bunch of campaign settings, and now we even have a couple of Magic the Gathering settings that are D&D settings. All of those are kind of like macro lore, where in the sense that you're playing in those worlds, and the experience of the game is kind of about playing in those worlds. So, in that case, all of that lore becomes really important, and it's super specific. And I think like if you play those games, you want those experiences, right? Compared to micro lore is like little things about the character classes, the races, the monsters. These things are great because you can pull these out of the D&D lore and wrap them right into your own games. And it doesn't really change your homebrew. It's just going to add some cool little details, but there's so many great nuggets. Ted, in one of your games, you used a piece from the Gnolls and Yenagu and how they make more Gnolls, and like, because either we read it and forgot it, or we're not as familiar with the 5e lore for Gnolls as we were for maybe previous editions. We're like, oh my God, that was so cool, Ted. Did you make that up? He's like, no, I pulled it right from the book. And I also ran an adventure about, a Pegasus being captured because evil creatures were going to ritually rip off its wings and torture it and turn it into a nightmare. Did not make that up. That's just how nightmares are made. So there's little details in D&D lore like that you can pull out, and they're just awesome adventure seeds.
Yeah, so if you, look through the monster manual and you find something that appeals to you, go ahead and read up on, those few paragraphs. Sometimes it might be at most a page, but you can learn information and be able to take elements and design an encounter, an adventure, or a campaign completely out of those things. And it winds up making, that game that much more engrossing to the players. And while, yes, there's some D&D people out there, or D&D players out there, who love this so much and are able to read, absorb, and retain information, I'm sadly, I've read so much that I don't remember everything. As much as I would love to be able to retain it all, it's just too much. But, you gravitate and you grab those things and you say, all right, I'm going to use this. And, for what I was working on for my campaign, I'm like, yeah, Yeenagu's definitely, a good fit. I had a very demonic theme for my game. I'm like, all right, this is going to work here. So let's make this work. The ritually torturing a Pegasus, that's super awesome. You can have fun with it, especially when we're talking about a game. I obviously wouldn't do that in real life if I could find a Pegasus. I'd rather have a horse that could fly than a horse that's on fire. Despite the fact
that might drop you into the 9 hells and leave you there.
Indeed, that is true as well. And I'm kind to animals. But when you do these kinds of things and you make it your own, you wind up creating things that become yours. Dave, you pointed out, elements of Forgotten Realms or Eberron. And I had a friend in college who ran a Forgotten Realms campaign, but he didn't read all the novels. He didn't read every single book that was out there about lore. So he told his players straight up, like, all right, this is my world. And, I'll call him out. This is Spotto Realm. So Dan, if you happen to be, somehow watching this video, yeah, I'm talking about you, sir. So in Spotto Realms, if he changed something that, was already existing in the books or in any of the, pre-existing lore, and the players at the table knew it and know that he's made a change, they have to just deal with whatever changes because he's the DM and he's going to be the one controlling the lore.
Well, I recommend anyone running in a set D&D campaign or world, like that is a good precursor to the game in session 0 and being like, you know what, there are going to be times that I go away from canon, and that is where this becomes an alternate Forgotten Realms or Eberron or whatever, and the world has changed. And also, like, that's part of the fun of playing D&D is making it unique. But speaking of unique, how do you take lore and make it unique to your world?
Well, I mean, that's, there's so many ways to go about doing it. And, part of it is going to be, what makes your world unique. If you're running Forgotten Realms or a pre-existing world versus your homebrew, it doesn't matter, where your base is, where you're starting. The question is, what is it about you as a DM? What is it about the game that you want to run? And what it is about your setting that is going to make that a unique experience? All of these things are really important. If you are running, with all 3 pillars, then you're going to incorporate everything. You're going to incorporate lore into your world through the use of the exploration pillar, and you're going to uncover things. If you have something in the rule set that you don't particularly like, you can say, all right, I'm going to make that change. And, we've said this probably countless times, but like when you look at the Dragonborn, when we first started playing D&D, like Dragonborn weren't things that you could play. The closest we had was like in Dragonlance, there were Draconians, and they are so far different than Dragonborn. It was crazy.
Way cooler.
To some extent, they were cooler. But
they're also the bad guys essentially. So there was that.
Yes, but when they died, bad stuff happened. But now we've got Dragonborn, and the people who love those kinds of races, more power to you. There's nothing to say that you can't have a Draconian-esque race. So yeah, go for it. But in our world, we don't like the way 5th edition presents them as a modeled, scale color as brass or bronze, what have you.
I got news for you, Ted. Nobody does. Literally, I've yet to meet a person that plays that Dragonborn. Like, you in the comments, tell me if your group does that. Every single group I've played with, if there's a Dragonborn, they're blue, they're red, they're gold, they're whatever. They look like the dragon that they're supposed to be associated with.
But we bring it up. But there's other things that you can wind up making changes to as well. I'm all for anything that says, oh well, this is this alignment. This thing is evil or this thing is good. I want to turn things on their sides. I want to make players question the encounter. And literally the last session that I ran, I had a big bad encounter that I had planned, and I was expecting to put some serious hurt on them, but the players were like, nah, we're gonna talk to this thing too. And I'm like, how many evil things are these guys gonna just befriend and see what happens? So
listen, Ted, just because we befriended it does not mean it isn't going to eat our faces later.
Oh, believe me, I've got my DM notes on all of these things.
Whose faces look the tastiest. So so those are some things like where you can take things and make them unique to your world. Like the generic Dragonborn, no one does that. So in our world, they're not. Like you're very distinct. Maybe they're clannish and they break off by their colors, but it may not have anything to do with their alignment per se. It's just aesthetics and how they kind of look and what element they're attuned to. And or maybe you don't have Dragonborn in your world. You literally use Draconians and have converted them from Dragonlance, and you're playing a homebrew world. You're not playing Dragonlance, and you use them how you want to. These are all ways that you can kind of incorporate this stuff into your games, and even like the little monster tidbits, you can pull them out and turn them into whole campaign arcs. You could build like the Nothic. It has this really cool story where they're this cursed race and now they crave arcane items. Like your players could discover that civilization, right? You can adapt it to your world. They're in the ruins. It's overrun by Nothics, which would be terrifying, right? But then they can start uncovering the story about how they were transformed, how they were cursed, and these are all just ways that you can just turn this stuff and make it your own.
So yeah, making it your own is the the best way to go. I've seen players or I've seen DMs just remove races because it's like, yeah, they don't fit the current story that I'm in, or I find this race annoying. So if in your world you want to say, all right, session 0, hey guys, just to let you know, gnomes and elves are off the table. Sorry, pick something else. You can definitely have a lot of fun with it that way. There's plenty of race choices in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. So just removing a couple of them, while it might, upset somebody, it's totally doable.
Yep, just let them know ahead of time. But you know what? We do have another video where we do jump into more specific lore and even some mythology in this video up here. D&D Lore and More the Chimera.
Nerdarchy has been known to create its own lore over on Patreon, so you can always support us over there.
It's not all we do. We do monthly fan games. We have monthly giveaways that our patrons are automatically entered in, and more.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.